One thing I'd like to say is that I have been praying to the ancestors for a long time that more of us, more of the ancestors' children, start reclaiming our traditional indigenous practices, our spiritual practices. These are things that were lost in order to make our ancestors good slaves. And they knew that in order to break the will of our ancestors, the spiritual traditions and the things that gave us power had to be taken away from us, okay? And it was. But
Ask the streets.
Ask the streets. Ask the streets.
I like that one.
Shit getting hard, but we ain't letting up. Yeah, we all fall down, but we ain't giving up. Watch the haters fall down, cause you ain't giving up. Can't keep your head down, lift your spirit up. Shit getting hard, but we ain't letting up. Yeah, we all fall down, but we ain't giving up. Watch the haters fall down, cause you ain't giving up. Can't keep your head down, lift your spirit up. Can't keep your head down, keep your head up. Fuck them hating niggas, get your bread up. Motherfuck 12, they ain't scaring us. Motherfuck the devils, they ain't scaring us. Real niggas ride with me, yeah, they know it's up. Gotta make a name for yourself, yeah, they know it's us. Gotta keep a small circle, cause you can't trust. Gotta watch out for these hoes, cause they gon' lust. Only real niggas, they gon' understand. Real OGs always got a plan. Showing young niggas how to be a man. Make my mama proud, cause that's my best friend. Shit getting hard, but we ain't letting up. Yeah, we all fall down, but we ain't giving up.
I ain't had time to run out.
Yeah, you say this is the altar?
Yeah, this is just me refilling the oil in this oil lamp. This is a very old school way of setting lights, as we call it. This is more traditional. But what I like about working an oil lamp is most people fancy these candles these days. You know, they get the candles, and candles are wonderful. But what I like about an oil lamp is that you can put things inside of the bowl of the lamp. And if you can see, there's stuff down there, okay? And the things that are in there are things like lodestone and magnetic sand. There's coins in there, and each coin represents a member of this household by the date of their birth. So each one of us has a coin that's specific to us, to represent us, and that represents prosperity coming to us. Okay, so that's in there. There's some herbs and roots in there that represent health. Okay, so to keep us all, you know, healthy and invigorated, and keep illness and accidents things like that away from us. And other blessings are put in there in the form of different objects that are consistent with this tradition. Mostly this tradition is seen as a practical form of magic. Some people call it folk magic or whatever, and the spiritual components have been taken away over time. Okay, there was a very rich spiritual tradition associated with this practice. It's just that most of our ancestors went to church. Okay, that's why you will see things like this on the ancestral altar. Now, we are not practicing Christians in this house, but our ancestors were. Right. So when we honor our ancestors, we have to also respect their religious traditions or beliefs. Okay, and what you don't see on this altar that I took down are Hindu gods and goddesses. This is my father, and he was a Hindu. Okay, he was born into the Hindu tradition because he's South Asian. He was born in India. And he was Hindu for most of his life until he converted to Christianity. So in order for me to honor his ancestors who were Hindu, I sometimes put Hindu-related things on this altar to honor them as well. Okay, but we have this here Holy Bible here because he became a Christian My husband's family also, were Christians. The people in my family were Christians. So we put this here to honor them. And I read from it from time to time to honor them. Okay, it's a show of respect. It's just like with the foods that I sometimes put on here as well. It's not like, whatever I eat, I'm just going to force it on my ancestors because they ate differently. Okay, for example, I might not eat pork. You know what I'm saying? But one of our ancestors was really fond of pig feet. Okay, so I will cook pig feet to honor those ancestors that like to eat that food. Okay, so I see a lot of stuff with people online who, say, well, I'm vegan, so I'm never going to put meat or dairy. That's just the wrong approach. That, the ancestral altar is for you to honor your ancestors. You want to honor yourself. You cook yourself some vegan food and you eat that food. You bless that food and eat that food for you. But when you want to honor your people, you can't put restrictions or impose what you think is right on your ancestors, because obviously they did what they thought was good, and if it was good enough for them, it should be good enough for you, because without them you wouldn't exist.
Right.
That's the bottom line. So we honor the people who lived and loved in life to make us possible. Okay? So you don't necessarily have to use pictures of people. Okay? If you have them, that's great. But when I got started doing this, I had 0 photographs of ancestors. I only had 3 things on my ancestral altar, and that was 1 single white candle, 1 glass of water, and a flower. That was it. Okay, no other objects, no photos. But over time, things just changed, and pictures started to get added, objects started to come on. Like we have certain things here that belong to the people that have passed on, for example. So, it's just a growth process, as you move on in time. And this is something that I've been doing for a very long time. I think I started with this in the 90s, 1990, somewhere around there. And so it has expanded. And this is just a traditional Black American approach to this. Everybody's approach will be different. I know that a lot of Black folk are now starting to go back to the spiritual traditions of our ancestors of West Africa, right? And they might be doing it through the root of the diaspora. They might be going through the Afro-Latino expressions of these traditions, or they might be going directly to the West African continental expression of these traditions. And so each tradition has its own approach to honoring the ancestors. They have their own rules, and what those rules and preferences are have no bearing on people outside of that tradition. So I see a lot of people online getting into actual arguments and debates about the right way and the wrong way to honor your ancestors. And people are totally ignoring that, Black Americans, we've been doing this.
There's no rules, what you're saying. So however they want to, so it wouldn't be no debate, basically.
Well, the thing about it is we've always done this as Black folks, okay? When you go to that old person's house, be it your grandmama or, auntie so-and-so or sister so-and-so who may not be your blood relative, but you think she was, because they were just that close to your people, you will see, the pictures up there with the bric-a-brac. You might see some fresh flowers or maybe some fake flowers, and you'll see that on the mantle. You'll see that on the ship robe. You'll see that in the curio cabinet, the china cabinet, and things like that. And we've always done it. It was just that we have lost the meaning behind it. We just kind of do things that are attributed to Black culture, and it's just what Black folk do. Right? But the meaning behind a lot of what we do has been lost. The spiritual association have been lost. So I feel that as Black people, we are tasked, well, I am anyway, I'm tasked to try to reclaim and put these bits and pieces of what was lost back together again, because these traditions were stronger with the earlier generations of Africans who were brought here, who most of us descended from. Okay, the first generation, the second generation. So with each generation, these traditions got diluted. They got busted up, broken up, fragmented. okay, as far as the physical manifestation of ritual and tradition is concerned. A large part of this, however, is in our blood. It's in our very DNA, so we can't really run from it that way. So even folks who think they ain't doing this juju are actually doing the juju, even in the churches.
Right.
When folks get slain in the spirit, well, that's an African spiritual tradition of communing with our ancestors long gone, as with the divine forces of nature that they honored and revered. That has never left us. I don't care what you call it. You can call it demonic, you can call it evil, devilish, satanic. None of those European labels are really doing it justice when you do that. This is a very, very rich tradition, okay? And it is in us. That's the one thing that our enslavers could not destroy or permanently, take away from us. We just adapted. So as we went into the churches and did all these things, we just adapted what was inherently a part of our spiritual / physical being, and we express it in a lot of different ways. Our praise style is one expression of it. The way we dance, the way we cook our food, the way we tell stories, the way we move, the way we love, the way, just everything we do, is a continuum from our ancestors and ways in which they actually celebrated their spirituality. Okay, it's just that we don't look at it that way. When someone dies, we pour libations, except we don't really call it that. We just know getting a 40 and meeting up on the corner and pouring it for the homie that just passed, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that's an African continuum. It was something our ancestors did as a part of a whole ceremony. Pouring libations for the ancestors. Another thing I have here, this is symbolic, okay, of something that our African ancestors brought to this land, and those are the groundnut, or the guba, if you're from the South, or the peanut, as most people know, and the black-eyed pea is in there. Okay, that's something that they brought. And the okra, which they brought here as seeds. Those are indigenous items to West Africa, okay? So every year we celebrate New Year's and we eat certain types of food. And it varies from family to family, region to region. But in my family, they ate black-eyed peas with okra in it and some sort of piece of pork. And then we have our greens and our cornbread and our candied yams or sweet potatoes, whatever you want to call it, and our sweet potato pone, Got to represent my family. That's basically pureed or whipped sweet potatoes. And so we eat these things as sort of a ritual, right? As part of our culture and tradition on New Year's Day. And what we lost is why we do it. We say we do it for prosperity and good luck for the new year, okay? But the part that was lost is we fix a plate and we set it out for those that we lost, okay? Mm-hmm. We set it out for those, all of them that we've lost, our ancestors, right? So that's the part that we don't really do, as a group, because we've been so cut off from our original indigenous spiritual traditions. But we're pretty consistent with eating these foods. We just changed the meaning of why we eat these foods. But I put these foods here because in the root working tradition, they represent prosperity, right? Because you always want to keep food in your house, right? And food represents wealth in some cases. Okay, so laying tricks with beans and seeds and things like that are usually a part of the root work for money drawing, wealth drawing, money protection, wealth building, prosperity attraction, and things like that. But basically, that's part of the reason why I have that here. And another reason I have it here is to honor those ancestors that brought these specific items to this land that are still eaten and celebrated by their children, you and I, to this day. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a black person in America, and I don't care if they're from the South or not, you'd be hard-pressed to find a black person in America who does not do this. He doesn't eat black-eyed peas, black-eyed peas and collard greens on New Year's. I don't think I've ever met anybody that didn't, you know, and I don't care where they people from. Everybody does it. So that's just, you know, part of us honoring our people and getting the blessings of the ancestors, you know, on and on until the new year. So that's what that is.
Okay. I appreciate the walk through the altar. It's not so okay. Well, I guess I would have one question. Now, it's nothing like nothing. Not I wouldn't say spiritual, but is it like supposed to be magical?
Yes, yes. The African view of things, there is no such separation of the so-called magical or paranormal or supernatural from the natural. Okay. That we just don't think that way. That's a Western European way of putting things in little neat boxes, separating them out, and then analyzing them as parts, right? Instead of looking at things holistically. The African view is to look at things holistically, okay? So there was no, for example, separation between spiritual illness and physical illness, okay? All illness was just illness. And so the approaches to treating illness was through the usage of certain materia, right? Like the bones, the blood, the dirt, the powders, the roots, the sticks, the stones, the feathers, the beaks, the innards, the entrails, you know, the carvings, the statues, the drum, and on like that. All right, and then certain things were mixed together and put on the body or put in the body to be ingested, to be laid upon, okay? Wherever the infection or illness was, there was a spiritual component and a physical component. And even in this land, we saw that as well. And we call those folks root doctors, okay? And they basically had the same task, okay, to address certain things with a spiritual connotation. So medicine was either made to be ingested like it is, you know, with traditional medicine and pharmacy, but not always. Sometimes these things were compounded and put in the person's presence. Okay, certain things may have been burned, for example, and then the smoke was allowed to waft around the person's being. All right, that's why sage is so popular. Black folks are really into burning sage. Well, there's a reason. You're basically giving credence to something that was lost along the timeline of your bloodline, and you're reclaiming that for yourself because your spirits know it's something that they know. Okay, so that's why we're sort of gravitating toward, you know, this incense burning thing, okay, because they burned leaves, they burned wood, they burned oil, they burned bones, all kinds of things for healing and for other reasons as well. So down south, I heard stories about how, for example, my grandfather, that's my mother's dad right there. And one of my older cousins told me a story about how she was visiting our grandparents and had gotten a chest infection or a chest cold, and he was in the kitchen boiling sugar and onions in water, okay, and he basically cooked up a syrup, okay, so he's over the stove stirring this, you know, making this thing for his grandbaby, okay, and so he gave her this syrup, and then another thing they did to her was take goose grease and camphor. Okay, they mixed up some goose grease and camphor and put a salve on her back and on her chest and then wrapped it up with cotton batting. So she had that going on, plus the syrup that my granddaddy made out of the onions and the sugar water, and gave that to her, and she said she was totally fine when she woke up the next day. Good to go. Okay, so that's an African continuation of what our ancestors did back on the continent before they came here. Something like this, for example, black folks of a certain age will recognize this because they would have had to have taken it on a spoon of sugar. That's usually how people take it. Now, this is considered a toxin or a poison. It's turpentine, more commonly used as paint thinner, right? But the old folks down south knew that this had curative and medicinal qualities. So if you ever played barefoot out in the country and you came back in the house, and you might have to take a spoonful of turpentine, you know what I'm saying?
A spoonful of turpentine.
Yeah, on some sugar, because it's some nasty shit. So anyway, there is a spiritual component to this as well. I remember my mother telling me a story about how her brothers had to go down the road to help this one lady do something on her property. And when they got back, grandmama had to rub turpentine on their feet, okay? And when I first heard that, I didn't think much of it, because I'm like, oh, okay, that's for the worms. You know how you run around barefoot in the country and the ground is wet or moist. There are them little critters that are small enough to get through your pores and, you know,
right,
and then go through your bloodstream and then end up in your gut, and then you shit them out, you know. So
take words out.
Right, but there was also a spiritual reason for rubbing that turpentine. It is to get rid of spiritual messes that they may have stepped in, because old lady down yonder was known for laying tricks on folks. So that was another reason this turpentine was rubbed on the bottom of the feet and on the shoes in a protective way, to protect against spiritual negativity. Okay, so I keep this bottle of turpentine on my ancestral altar because I do it to, you know, pay homage to my people who did in fact use it as part of their, you know, it was in their healing cabinets. And I also use it just to honor and recognize them and thank them so much for the things that they did, so that people in my family could survive another generation and they could create new generations, because that's the African view, to perpetuate our bloodline, right? So we got to do everything we can to ensure that we live long enough to keep our bloodlines going, because the African view is of the belief that we're immortal. And the key to immortality is through our bloodline. So our ancestors are never gone. They're never dead. They're never far away from us. All right, we're living, walking manifestations of them. So because we live, we then in fact make them immortal beings, and our children continue that process, and so will their children and their children and their children, and on and on and on. So that's how we look at immortality. Okay, so we do these things to just ensure, you know, we have successful mortality for us and our family, so we can ensure that our ancestors remain immortal as well.
All right, now.
If you have questions that you would like to ask the streets, contact us at askthestreetsmedia@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching.